Hello and welcome back to Talking Europe. The EU faces what is arguably its stiffest foreign policy test since the war in Ukraine began. A devastating attack on Israel by Hamas has met with a massive Israeli response in the Gaza Strip. This is being described as the worst chapter in the Arab-Israeli conflict since the War of 1973. Perhaps ironically, a peace initiative was launched only a few weeks ago on the sidelines of the UN General Assembly, with the European Union as a leading member. So what to make of how the EU has handled this so far? I'm joined by Karen Melchior, a Danish MEP from Renew Europe, and by Antonio Lopez Isturiz-White, a Spanish MEP from the European People's Party. Welcome to both of you. Thank you for being on the program. I'd like to get your comments first, perhaps, on this massacre at the kibbutz of Kfar Aza, which, of course, has been the subject of so much international comment in the last couple of days. What do you make of the EU response to that, Karen Melchior?
I think the EU has been standing with Israel when it's been attacked by a terrorist organization, killing indiscriminately innocents, kids, babies, and kidnapping elderly and even handicapped people.
Anthony?
I wish it was all the European Union, but unfortunately we have seen forces of extreme left in France, in Spain, and in many countries not even considering, what has happened. We have to be strict, we have to be united Europeans. There is no ideology about this. It's just a massacre produced by terrorist organizations that are led by Iran, financially and political control over these organizations, serving the agenda of Iran and taking as hostages the population of Palestine and of Israel.
There's obviously been a devastating response, as I said, in Gaza, with tens of thousands of Palestinians displaced now. What's your reaction to that?
That they don't care. The terrorist groups that I know, because I lived that in Spain years ago, and my family suffered that, and my political, party, we know about it. It's just, they don't respond to any logic. They just want to kill by any means. They use political, religious, territorial topics as excuse just for the killing. That's what these terrorist organizations are about. I know that they do not represent the Palestinians. They are just, as I told you, is the control that they have, the Iranians, over Gaza, West Bank, and also south of Lebanon with Hezbollah.
Karen Melchior, what about the plight of the Palestinians? Obviously, what is going to be a humanitarian disaster now in the Gaza Strip as well.
It's really important that we distinguish between the Palestinian population and the terrorist organization Hamas that is holding them hostage and has been doing so since 2007. I think it's tragic that you have a rogue commissioner like Vareli going out and saying that we need to cut all aid to the Palestinians, when we need to make sure that there is humanitarian aid to the civilians that are caught in the crossfires between Israel and Hamas in Gaza. We need to distinguish between the terrorists that are using indiscriminate killing for their own ends. They want us to react in a way that will support them in the long term. We need to make sure that Hamas does not win from this situation by the way that we respond.
Yes, let's just quickly unpack this question about the mixed messaging, right? Because we had this one commissioner who came forward to say that aid to the Palestinians was being suspended. Then another commissioner said, no, actually, the humanitarian needs of the Palestinians would continue to be met. Is Europe just all over the place on this?
Unfortunately, a perfect example that we have to change our foreign affairs approach in this European Union. This show of this coordination that the Commission has shown, with different declarations from Borrell, for Ursula von der Leyen, and now Bargeli and the others. We have to show unity, not only in this case, but in many others. And yes, money has to arrive for, that Europeans, we are the best donors in humanitarian aid in the world. And it has to arrive to the Palestinians. But we have to control that this money really arrives to the people that they need, not to terrorist organizations, like many suspicions have been aroused many times about this topic. It is time now for the Commission to have full control over this.
Well, the EU Commission has said that there was going to be a review to make sure that the EU funding doesn't indirectly enable any terrorist organizations. But this is the sort of review, I mean, this is the kind of information that you would think the EU would have already had, no? I mean,
Hamas has been a terrorist organization for decades. Of course, no EU funding should be contributing to support Hamas. And I don't think that this is the case at the moment. And if it is, it's a scandal. We need to look at the response by Verhely, the tweet that he made. I think this is a case of deliberate misinformation. And I think Verhely needs to be held accountable for what he's been doing. And we need to question whether he's the right commissioner.
whether he's what, sorry?
Whether he's the right commissioner for the job. I think it's worrying that Ursula von der Leyen hasn't sort of taken him into her office and held him responsible for this tweet. There has been no forceful reaction from the Commission leadership. I think the Parliament needs to call him in for at least an AFED meeting or a question time in the Parliament.
Do you agree with that?
I don't know if this is really a priority right now.
Yeah.
The priority is to know where our euros are going, and that the taxpayers' European money, that they are also very interested what we are using the money for here in the European Parliament, in the European institutions. I think that they have the right also to know if the money is controlled. Okay, Verhely has said there are, let's show unity. I mean, I don't care about Oliver Verhely or the other, I mean, it is time now to be pragmatical and to help the Israeli people, in this moment of sufferance, and also, the Palestinians that will suffer the consequences of the activities of terrorist organizations. That is the priority.
And you see a lack of a unified voice undermining that goal.
Yes, unfortunately, the Europeans, we are divided not only in this topic, to say, we all know, in many topics. That's why I'm, a member of 20 years member of the Foreign Affairs Committee in the European Parliament. I think I have some experience to say that this has to change radically.
We know that some EU member states, when the whole joint response was being discussed, they wanted an emphasis on de-escalation, I gather. Denmark, Luxembourg, and Ireland were pushing for that. Then you've got other countries like the Czech Republic, which is traditionally perhaps more pro-Israel in a way. How serious are these cracks now, do you think?
I think they're not more serious than they have been before, but they're being shown more now.
Yeah.
I completely agree. We need to have European unity on this question, but we also need to take into account the human suffering on both sides. We have had a blockade for decades. We've had a failure in this situation, not only of the Israeli intelligence that did not see this attack coming, but also of the Israeli policy since 2007 in how to deal with Hamas. Hamas is a terrorist organization, financed in part by Iran, which is also why we've been calling for putting the Iran Republican Guard on the terrorist list to stop the financing of Hamas.
I mentioned in my introduction the Peace Day initiative, which Josep Borrell, the EU foreign policy chief, was talking about at the UN in September. Is the EU, can the EU even be heard when it talks about Middle East peace? I mean, does anyone actually care at this stage about what the EU says?
Unfortunately, no, because the tragedy here is the European Union is the largest donor for humanitarian aid in the world. But we are incapable, we are not invited to this kind of tables, mediation processes. We are not even considered. Something is wrong here. And this is something that I have stated we have to change.
Yeah, how would you change that?
First of all, in the Council, we need, for example, unanimity in decisions in foreign affairs has to end. If not, we are going nowhere. We'll have this kind of shows every time.
But you'd want majority voting for decisions?
Much needed.
I think this whole discussion about treaty change and majority voting is a nice theoretical discussion, but we need to hold both parties accountable in the Middle East peace process. We've had our humanitarian development aid being destroyed by Israeli army without any of the money coming back, without any accountability. There are no progress on the ground on the peace processes since the Oslo agreements, and the EU has been doing nothing to hold changing Israeli governments accountable for their lack of commitment to finding a two-state solution and a peaceful solution in the Middle East.
Do you think the EU has that political weight, though, because your colleague seems to be saying that it doesn't really have that at the moment?
It's choosing not to have it because it's not keeping the Israeli governments accountable for their actions. It's allowing illegal settlements while at the same by greenlighting fly zone agreements with Israel. We're not making our weight shown as an economic partner with Israel, keeping them accountable for their actions on the ground, undermining initiatives for peace.
I do not share this pessimistic view.
Yeah.
For example, we are members of the European Parliament. Only in this political term of 5 years, we have had something like 8 resolutions criticizing Israel.
It's nice with words and resolutions.
We don't need, finally, maybe we will have one now condemning Hamas, and let's see. I'm not so, not so optimist that we will find this kind of condemnation like we have had 8 resolutions against the government of Israel, different governments, not only Benjamin Netanyahu, but also left governments condemning, Israel. I think that we have been clear enough.
Just a final point on that from you before we wrap.
We have many words and speeches and resolutions. We need to show real action, putting our economic weight where our words are. If we want Israel to deliver on peace negotiations, then we need to not approve flight deals with them at the same time as Netanyahu was approving illegal settlements.
We'll have to end it there. Thank you so much to both of my guests, Antonio Lopez Isturiz-White and Karen Melchior. And that's all for this episode of Talking Europe. Thank you very much for joining us.